Hello viewers, and thank you once again for tuning on to BrandPlus TV today. I'm your host Chef Andy, and today we are going to be bringing a different kind of technique of cooking today. I'm going to be incorporating baking and fish, and I'll also take you through a very simple process of making some fries and some salsa to go with this beautiful dish. Now, before we take off into the preparation of this dish, we're going to begin by introducing what's before us today. And I'll start from the very front, where we've got about a tablespoon of some tomato ketchup. I've also got 2 cloves of garlic and a handful of cherry tomatoes. You'll also require 1 large chili and 1 whole lemon, some salt for seasoning, and some fresh coriander. You will require also about 200 grams of some whole tilapia, about 1 large potato, 1 large onion, some oil for frying, some black peppercorns to crush, and of course some aluminum foil which you'll be using for your baking process. But before we begin, we're going to take a short break, allowing you to grab your pens and papers if you're taking notes, and we'll catch you after the very short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to start this very simple process of baking some fish, and I'll start off by taking off that wrapper, and we'll also proceed to damp our fish a little bit. Remember, it is a little wet on the surface, so you may want to run some kitchen paper right around your fish, making sure to keep the cavity dry, just as you did for the skin. And proceed to move that onto your board. Now, very important to remember, especially with working with baked fish, you may actually not be able to get this fish off the pan or off your baking tray very easily. But remember, with the aid of some aluminum foil, it will become quite a little easier for you. So I'm going to start off by just trimming off the gills. And as usual, proceed to score your fish on each side, making 3 to 4 incisions depending on the size of the fish, but always making sure not to go right through the mid rib, because it will actually help in holding your fish together. Now, next up, we're going to proceed to salt our fish. So I will start on the first side and rub that into the skin very gently. Something also to pay attention to when getting your fish: be sure to scale it before doing this, because it will actually make it very hard for you to get that salt rub over the skin. Proceed to do the same for the other end, taking your time to make sure most or all of that salt sinks into those incisions you made. And last but not least, always do the same thing for the cavity of the fish. And that is now just about ready to go into the oven, but we'll also begin to slice 1 large lemon. So I'll begin by taking that root end off, and I'll proceed to slice that as thin as possible, to as many slices as you possibly can achieve. Proceed to slice all the way to the very end. Of course, always making sure to take off that last tip of your lemon, because this actually carries quite a bit of rind and very little juice. Now we're going to proceed to prepare our baking tray. So I'm just going to set that right in front for you all to see. And now with your aluminum foil right in the center of the table or on top of your baking tray, proceed to rub over some oil. Remember, this will allow for your fish to not stick onto the baking tray or onto the aluminum foil. And you can also proceed to go as far as wide as you possibly can, or rather as far as wide as your oil will allow you to reach. And you can also slide it sideways and just proceed to pull that bit of coating to the very end. Very handy to have in your kitchen, some kitchen towel. It will always help you and avoid you from touching water too many times while working. And now we're going to start this very simple process by placing some slices of lemon onto our aluminum foil. You can also reserve about 3 slices to put right over the top, but very, very importantly, I'm going to add 1 slice into the cavity of the fish. I'll also proceed to pound down about 2 cloves of garlic, and you can also just place those right inside your fish cavity. And now proceed to just move your fish right over your lemon slices and proceed to cover with the rest of your lemon slices right over the top. Be sure to rinse at this stage. And very simply grind over some black peppercorns. Remember, those give it a nice, beautiful flavor and heat. And be sure to give it quite a generous sprinkling of your black pepper, just to make sure that the flavor seeps through right through to the very bottom. And once that's done, we're going to proceed to cook this on papalot. So it's a very, very simple technique. It's basically cooking a dish inside a casing. So you begin by folding the end closest to you, folding that over the fish. Proceed to fold the other end over, and by holding it very firmly at the center, proceed to just almost just squeeze down the sides like that, almost making it knot, but not really twisting it over. Remember, you also need to make it easier for you to open this once it's done. And now, just to allow for some steam to escape, remember, fish will of course cook in there. There will be some steam that will be produced, but to enable you to allow that to escape, very simply make some incisions to the side of your aluminum foil, making sure they're as small as you possibly can get them. That way you can actually trap in quite a bit of steam as well. And now from here, we're going to proceed to move this to the oven. Now at this stage, I have already my oven already preheated to about 200 to 180 degrees. So we're going to place this at the very middle of the oven and allow this to continue cooking for anywhere between 25 to 35 minutes. We are going to give it a check while it continues. And of course, we will open also the bag towards the very end, allowing you to see the contents. So I'm just going to slide this into the oven. And as I mentioned, very important for you to preheat your oven before doing this. It will allow for an even cooking. And of course, you always get the temperature extremely right. So we're going to slide this right into our oven, making sure to just lift the sides of your foil, making sure they don't touch the sides of your oven. And once that's in there, we're going to set our timer and calibrate our temperature, and we're going to allow that to continue. So very simply, we're going to rinse that under the tap very, very briefly. Of course, very important to mention that you may not want to contaminate your food by working with cross ingredients across your board. So proceed to first rinse off the side that you are working with, and then turn over to the drier end. Very important to also dry your hands and your board to make sure that you don't slip and cut yourself. Wipe also around your board. And now we're going to proceed to just chop up our potatoes. So I'll begin by pouring out the water. And very, very simply proceed to grab a shallow pan. And we will proceed to add some oil to this. Of course, making sure to cover at least an inch in thickness from the base. And you can now proceed to get your pan going and allow your oil to heat up. And while that does so, proceed to grab a sharp knife and very simply proceed to start slicing your fries. So a very simple technique I like to use: hold your fries, or rather your potato, lengthways, and begin by taking a very, very thin slice off the base. Remember, once that's down on the board, it will allow for your potato to hold position and make it a little easier to slice. Now next up, proceed to use your knife to slice through, making sure to have some very, very evenly thickened slices, and this will allow for a nice even chop for your potatoes as well. Proceed to remove the end as well, and very simply, by turning that over with the biggest wedge at the bottom and the smallest at the top, proceed to slice very thinly, and proceed to do the same for the other piece. Right, simple as that. So all you need to do now is proceed to move this into your hot oil and allow them for the fast cooking. Remember, very important to mention, especially if you're making fries, a very, very good technique of getting your potatoes to cook very, very evenly right through the center. You can always throw them into your oil before it's extremely hot. So this should be anywhere between 150 and 160 degrees if you're using a digital or any kind of thermometer. And you can allow them to continue blanching, and that will allow for them to cook very evenly on the inside. Then you can proceed to take them out and throw them back into hot oil, and that will give you a nice, beautiful, crisp finish to them. But you will be able to see that very shortly. So I'm just going to proceed to start making the salsa. So the salsa is a very, very simple accompaniment to a dish such as fish. Remember, it is actually a very, very light salad. It almost actually complements the dish, just like the African kachumbari would, but I'm just going to show you a different way of presenting it. So very simply, I'm going to start by taking off the tips of my onion and proceed to peel. Be sure to take off the skin completely. Now, if you're going to be using a medium-sized onion, you can proceed to use the whole piece, but for an onion as big as this, you may want to only use half and reserve the rest. Right, so onion peeled. Now very simply proceed to slice that right through the center, and you can reserve the rest of your onion, and also proceed to discard the rest of your skins. And now proceed to chop that very finely, by always beginning by cutting some slits right over the top of your onion, making sure to go almost towards the very end but not to the very last end. Turn your onion once and slice right through the bottom and almost also at the top, and proceed to chop that finely. Turn your onion sideways and proceed to finish off your onion completely, and discard the root end. And you can now proceed using your knife to just chop that very finely on your board. Remember, one particularly good characteristic of a salsa is to have your ingredients almost the same size or as fine as you possibly can get them. Now proceed to chop while drawing your onions towards the center of your board, making sure to clean your knife as you proceed. can now proceed to move your mixture into a bowl. So all your onions in at once. Right, once that is done, proceed to grab your fresh coriander leaves and proceed to shred those as finely as you possibly can. Simple as that, very, very easy salsa. You can also incorporate mango for those of you who may be also looking to make it a little fancier. Plenty of options for salsas out there as well, but we're going to be making a very, very simple one for this show. And now, actually our potatoes are now just almost completely golden in color. We're just going to grab a separate bowl. And into that, proceed to add a bit of some kitchen paper. And very, very simply turn off your heat completely, allowing your oil to begin to cool off. And you can begin to start removing your potatoes. Now these are actually nicely, beautifully browned as I mentioned, but remember you can actually make them a little crispy a little later. Proceed to remove all your potatoes. And you can allow those to sit very, very shortly on the side, giving them a bit of time to drain the excess oil. And that should give you enough time to proceed to slice your cherry tomatoes in half. Now for this particular recipe, I'm using cherry tomatoes for my salsa because they do actually come around in season very, very often these days, and you can actually be able to get this very much at your retail store. So I will recommend, it's a very, very good alternative to using whole tomatoes. And remember, they also carry a very, very beautiful sweetness and sharpness that always really brings a beautiful finish to a very simple salsa. So just to finish chopping those to the very end. Right, once that is done, proceed to grab a spoon, and into that you will proceed to drizzle in about a tablespoon of some olive oil, crush in also some black peppercorns, and of course, to incorporate your chili lastly, proceed to cut that right through the center into exact half, and just proceed to slice out that end with the stem, making sure to also clean your seeds out and separate them completely. Proceed to do the same for the other piece. And you can also shake or pat that over your board. It will help you nonetheless to get the seeds out. Proceed to discard those, always to make sure that you don't actually have any of those seeds mix into your salsa and really give it a bit of heat. And now very simply proceed to julienne your chili. Turn it sideways and proceed to chop that into some very, very small cubes. Now, very, very importantly to a salsa, never forget to season. Remember, this is where the heart of the salsa is. Perfect balance of seasoning. And of course, something I'll also add, always important to have a bit of extra lemons on the side. So just proceed to slice that in half. And while holding your sieve over your bowl, proceed to squeeze through, making sure that your seeds are not incorporated into the mixture. And proceed to discard. Now all you need to do now is give that a thorough mixture. Always making sure to turn your bowl. It always gives you a nice more even mix. And now once your salsa is done, you're going to proceed to allow that to sit in your refrigerator for just a few minutes. Remember, salsa does break the monotony of your hot fish and just balances the flavors really, really well. So we're going to allow this to cool off in the refrigerator for about 5 minutes while we actually allow for our fish to fully cook. And by the time we come back from the break, this will be done, and I'll take you to the last and final process of plating. So don't touch that dial. We'll see you in a very little while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you missed out on the second and first segment of the show today, remember you can always recap what you missed out on our YouTube channel. That's BrandPlus TV. And you may also be able to see a lot of more things that we've actually been doing here in this very studio in the past. And I'm sure you'll be able to grab something a little more interesting if this doesn't work out for you. But because we are right at the last and final stage, remember the fish is now done. So I'm just going to proceed to take this out of the oven. Right, once that's out, we're going to proceed to open up the aluminum foil. Thus proceeding to expose our fish. So I'm just going to easily take out those lemon slices that were over our fish. And now we're going to move this onto our plate. So for this you will need a lifter, beginning by lifting very gently from the tail and sliding your lifter right underneath. And by supporting the head end, proceed to move that to your plate. We can also proceed to remove that lemon slice that we had right in the cavity of the fish. And that, ladies and gentlemen, looks divine. As you can see, the skin is still holding on tight. You can be able to actually flake this very easily. So I'm just going to explain what flaking is and as a process of checking. So it's a very simple process where you grab a fork and you literally just proceed to push along the bone. And you should be able to actually lift the skin very, 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 very simply. So that is one particular beautiful checkpoint. You can also always check through the cavity and make sure that it's actually very, very cooked and it's not pink or red in any way. And that is a very, very easy pointer for you. So now we're going to finish this off by topping that with our salsa that we made earlier. So for this, I'm just going to plate the salsa towards that front end of the plate and just scoop the rest onto the other side, right along the fin of the fish. And as you can see, for a very, very small salsa mixture, it will actually go a long way. You may actually reserve just enough to even go into a second portion. So very, very simply, just to finish that off, remember we were serving our fries. Very simply, just pour out your dollop of ketchup right over your potatoes. And always very important, if you're serving fish, always refreshing to have a bit of lemon. So I'm just going to leave that right over the side. And it's just as easy as squeezing the lemon while having your fish. And it will always just help to bring out the beautiful flavors of the peppers and the beautiful salt and garlic that we infused into the cavity. I'm going to thank you once again for tuning in onto the show today. If you have missed out, remember we have a Facebook page. You can also leave your comments, queries, or any particular issues pertaining the show. We're always happy to hear back from you. But until the next episode, where we continue to bring some beautiful, tantalizing dishes, I'm going to bid you farewell, wishing you the best day ever, and I'll see you soon.